Now it's 3 in the morning, and I'm trying to change your mind. Left you multiple missed calls, and to my message you reply, why do you only call me when you're listening to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond?
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, our guest is part artist, philosopher, and sales-crushing storyteller. He is a sales keynote speaker where he shows companies' sales teams how to turn mundane case studies into compelling case stories so they win more new business. He's a best-selling author. He's the host of the successful Pitch podcast. Thrive Loud listeners, I bring you the Pitch Whisperer. John Livesay. John, how are you today?
Hey, Lou. Thanks for having me.
John's coming to us from California and wearing orange. You're not in California.
Coming to you from Austin, Texas, wearing orange.
You know what?
I moved here a year ago. Mm-hmm.
You've got a whole geography thing, and I apologize. But
yeah,
Austin, Texas is way cool, so you're in the right place.
Really it feels good to be here, yes.
Okay, so you've got some pretty unique skills, and I want to dive right into this because this is really something you and I just briefly spoke about before we hit record.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people out there who hate having to sell their wares, their services, their business, whatever it might be. They just don't like it.
Correct.
Have you always liked being able to sell your services?
I have always liked being able to sell my services. I never really thought there was a lot of shame around being a salesperson, like a lot of people think of, like, oh, it's a used car salesperson. It's slimy, it's pushy, it's manipulative. I always saw it as if you loved what you were selling. I mean, I used to watch Bewitched, and Darren Stevens worked for an ad agency pitching, and I thought, oh, that's why I majored in advertising. I thought that looks like a really fun job.
Which Darren was it? Was that the first Darren or the second Darren?
I watched them both. I was completely addicted. Yes.
So it's always been a thing. And I, by the way, I think this is an interesting thing that I've dealt with my entire life. I know people that hate the word sales.
Yes.
And I actually like it a lot. And from your experiences and the people you've been dealing with, is the word itself got a problem? Has it got a bad rap?
Oh, yes. I mean, back in the day, people would say, oh, you're an account executive. Now you're in charge of biz development. Anything but sales director, sales manager, sales rep. And for people who, they're hired, they go, this is a sales job. You have a quota, you've got deadlines, competition. But other companies that don't have that title have realized that they have to sell themselves. Lawyers, architects, financial planners, insurance people. So they're all struggling with, it's not my favorite part of the job. And yet it's a big part of whether I'm successful or not. So ironically, I find myself helping a lot of those people. But I'm always happy to be in front of a group of people who say, no, we know we're in sales and we want to get better at it. So it's a fun dichotomy depending on who I'm talking to.
As we hinted and whispered in there, the pitch whisperer and also the pitch itself.
Yes.
It's a tough thing to sometimes compact all the things that you might do, a service, a software, whatever it is, into the right story. Take us on a story here, John. Help the listeners understand a little bit of the work that you do in helping people to kind of spin the content or the products or the things they have into a way that makes it actually much more compelling.
Well, there's two different ways. There's the very beginning of the whole process where you need an elevator pitch, or I call them elevator stories. And the whole goal of that is to intrigue people to say, oh, that's interesting, Lou, tell me more. So that's storytelling at its best, where you intrigue someone to want to ask you a question and have a conversation. And then we can get into how I help people fix those elevator stories to get people to remember them, and more importantly, be able to repeat the story so that they could send referrals, even if they don't need you. But the real sweet spot comes where you're in the middle of the process. You've filled out the proposals. They've invited you to present, to pitch, whatever you want to call it. And you know you've got a couple, you're in the final three. I have to do that for myself still as a speaker. Mm-hmm. And at that moment is really where the storytelling is what's the magic. I was working with a healthcare tech company, and I said, what are you saying to get doctors to buy this? Oh, it makes the surgeries go 30% faster. Do you want one? And I said, that's the problem. It's a left brain numbers, speeds and feeds kind of thing. People buy emotionally and back it up with logic, even the most sophisticated technical product. So I worked with them on crafting a story. And the secret to a good story, Lou, is that people see themselves in it. So the example of that product, after me asking a few questions, is that now instead of saying 30% faster, they said, imagine how happy Dr. Higgins was 6 months ago down at Longmeats Memorial using our equipment, and he could go out to the patient's family in the waiting room an hour earlier than expected. And if you've ever waited for someone you love to come out of surgery, you know every minute feels like an hour. He comes out, puts them out of their waiting misery and says, good news, the scope shows they don't have cancer. They're going to be fine. And then turns to the rep and says, that's why I became a doctor, for moments like this. Now that rep tells that short, concise, compelling story to another doctor who sees himself in the story so much that they say, you know what? That's why I became a doctor. I want to talk to you about your equipment too.
Relating, connecting, and painting a picture that everyone can realize.
Yes.
There's a lot of question asking to kind of be able to set the scene, to be
exactly
specific.
Yeah.
Any specific method, or I don't want to give away your entire practice.
No, it's totally fine. I'm happy to explain. Yeah. There's 4 steps, and we'll go back to that story.
Yeah.
The first step is the exposition. You need to think of yourself like a journalist.
Exposition. I just had people taking off clothing for some reason. Anyway.
Yes. No, not that.
Not that exposing.
Yeah, exposition from a journalist standpoint.
Yes. Okay, got it.
There we go. Because if you don't paint the picture with some details, then people aren't in the story to begin with. So you notice I said the doctor's name, how long ago, where it was. We're like, oh, now we have a sense of where this story is taking place. Then the problem. And a great story describes a problem where the stakes are high. And in this case, the problem is, when I crafted this story for the client, they said, wow, not only are we not telling stories, it never occurred to us to make the patient's family a character in the story. So when you tug at people's heartstrings in a story, they open the purse strings. And you notice how I also use the technique of pulling you into the story by saying, if you've ever waited for someone you love. Now, even if you haven't, you probably know someone who had and can imagine how painful that is. I have been in that situation, so it was relatively easy for me to tap into that pain point of every minute feels like an hour when you're waiting to see if they're going to make it or not and what the results are going to be. So again, that's the stakes are high. The solution is relatively simple. The doctor comes out an hour earlier expected, which is the 30% faster. But the secret sauce is the resolution. If the story just ended, the patient didn't have cancer, you'd be like, okay. But the doctor says, that's why I became a doctor, for moments like this. That's what pulls other doctors into the story and that makes them think, why did I become a doctor? Yeah, that's that for those moments. Yes, I'm going to be the hero in the story and come out an hour earlier than expected. I'm in.
The people who you work with to help tell better stories so they can connect better to their customers.
Yes.
Where's the biggest hurdle for them? Is it finding the story that taps in most personally, maybe even telling the story because it might not be their natural sweet spot for what they do? Right. What do you see most often is the biggest challenge these people have?
Well, less and less I have to convince people of the importance of storytelling. That used to be the first hurdle. I don't understand. How does telling a story help us win more business? Most people now know that part. Then there is a big fear that I don't have a story. And I said, well, you never made a mistake. You never had a bad family holiday meal. Once they start to see how many stories they actually do have, it gives them some confidence. And then once they understand that it's a skill, it's not something you're born with. Maybe not everyone can sing like Pavarotti or act like Meryl Streep, but most people can learn how to tell a story with that structure, with some practice. And even if you're good at it, you can get better at it. Because at the end of the day, whoever tells the best story is the one that's going to get the sale. So if your competition is not telling a story and you tell an okay story, you've already increased your odds. But as more and more people start going, oh, I'm going to try and tell a little story here, you need to get at the black belt level of it.
The black belt level of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
In your career and the people who have been your mentors, who are some of the best storytellers that you've come across? Speakers, salespeople, or even someone outside of an industry, a family member or whatnot.
Yes.
I'd love to know who's affected you with the most stories in your life.
Well, Alison Levine, who climbed, the first woman to climb Mount Everest, is a phenomenal storyteller. And she was telling me that, you look at her career, you're like, oh, you climbed Mount Everest, the first woman to do it. You got this best-selling book. You've been on the Today Show. Of course, you're a speaker. And then she tells the story of how hard it was to get a break in speaking. And people said, we have somebody who climbed Mount Everest and they lost a limb. Did you lose a limb? They're making a movie of his life. Anybody making a movie of yours? And then you go, oh, wow. It wasn't easy. And then she goes on through the whole process of getting her big break when somebody else couldn't make it, and how she showed up in front of 6,000 people ready to go. And so, of course, I'm in that story saying, wow, if I got that phone call, would I be ready? And her whole takeaway is treat every opportunity like it's your big break, because it just might be.
It's funny. I try and figure out what connects with any story I hear. And I think I've learned, sitting in this spot, listening to some amazing stories, I can tell you that what I think the secret sauce is the uniqueness of the story, because it's their story. It's not a repeatable one. It's only theirs.
Yes.
And to dive into something that is so unique to that individual's particular being and who they are. When you hear that component of the story, you can't make it up, and nobody else can tell it better. Right. So I find that, and those who know how to craft it and have told their very powerful story are the ones that always get me. I don't know. Does that get you?
Yes, it's true. Because if you've another tip to improve everyone's storytelling skills, when you describe a situation, tell it in present tense so that the listener feels like they're eavesdropping in and in the moment with you. I tell a story of meeting Michael Phelps. And I literally talk about, I was so curious to talk to him. I'm a former lifeguard. Everyone says you're so successful because your feet are like fins and your lungs are bigger than the average person. I'm guessing there's something else, Michael. And he said, oh, yes, John. When I was first starting out, my coach said to me, Michael, are you willing to work out on Sundays? Yes, coach. Great. We just got 52 more workouts in a year than the competition. And then I ask everyone, okay, what are you willing to do to become an Olympic level architect, lawyer, consultant, coach, whatever it is you do? So I take that story, that moment I had with him, the takeaway, and then I figure out how to connect the dots so that the audience can start their brain working on the story, which locks the story in. Now, if I had just said, I met Michael Phelps, he said his secret to success was he worked out on Sundays.
Doesn't have the same vibe, does it?
No, but so I'm acting out the dialogue, changing my voice a little bit as young Michael and the coach and all of that. So that's another way you can really start to hone in on becoming a better storyteller. And why, when you hear a story, you go, oh, that got me, as you said, because you're in it.
One of the best stories I ever actually heard a long time ago was by Pat Riley. And he used to tell this famous story of the Lakers right before they had finally beaten the Celtics, and in the middle of the season, and just a ridiculous practice. And he went through him, stopped blowing the whistle in a practice and pulling them all at the center court and yelling at each of them. But what you noticed was that as he was yelling at each of them, he was physically, while telling the story, looking taller, because these people were much taller than he was. And you felt like the team was there on stage with him. And yes. I love those that only use voice to do it, but use just even the simplest prop, lifting the neck up, making it feel like you're in the room or you're reliving that experience. I love all that stuff. Helping people, though, find that personal story, all the things that connect with us. And when you work with these top performers to get them to do this, Um, do you make them dig a little? Do you do you give a little bit of like, hey, I hear that story. That sounds great, but come on, you got to be a little deeper with me. I could see you pushing John a little bit more than most.
Well, I was working with an architecture firm, and they were told by the client, we're going to hire the firm that we like the most. You could all do the work, otherwise you wouldn't be in the final three. Because the project's going to last 6 years. That's when I got pulled in, because they're not used to having that as a criteria. They're used to their designs getting them the work. And so the team slide became the most important slide, their personal story of origin, which they weren't even aware of. They go, if we don't have time, we'll skip this slide. I go, not with the likability as the criteria. And I said, what are you going to say? And they said, well, my name's Bill. I've been here 10 years. This is what I do. I go, no. So this is where I said, I ask a series of questions till I hear the right story. That, in this case, what made you become an architect? Oh, I was 11 years old. I was playing with Legos, and I just loved it so much. Now I have a son that's 11. I still play with Legos with him. I have that same passion. Okay, perfect. That's your story of origin. Where did you work before here, Stu? I was in the Israeli army. I'm like, okay. Since you're in charge of making sure this thing comes on time and under budget, if you guys win it, you learned all about focus and discipline. You're the perfect person for that job. So that's how I pull out the individual stories for the team slide, separate from the case story, that allows people to go, oh, we remember those people. We like those people. We have a sense of who they are, as opposed to just them boringly reading off their resume.
John, we jumped over your story. I just went straight to the stuff that you do. In the fast forward version of this, in the not rewind all the way to the womb.
Yes.
How did this become your main gig, helping to become the pitch whisperer? What was the direction that took you to say, this is what I got to be doing each and every day?
I was selling advertising for Conde Nast to major companies like Lexus and Guess Jeans. And they would say, we looked at 50 magazines. We've narrowed it down to 10. We're inviting you to come in and pitch back to back to back. And don't talk about numbers. And we're going to only pick 3. That was my first aha. Whoever tells the best story. And a lot of reps were like stumbling, going, I don't know how to sell if I can't talk about numbers. And then I had the good fortune of being able to have a book out 16 years ago, my first one, when I was selling ads. And I would say, if you run your car ad in this upscale magazine, it's probably going to get on the radar for people to take a test drive. But the added value is the magazine will buy copies of my book, and I will give a talk to your sales teams on how to sell to the luxury market, how to not take rejection personally. And that really was the beginning of my speaking career, where I said, everybody needs this. Everyone is on the self-esteem roller coaster, only feeling good if their numbers are up and bad if they're down. And I've been there. And so that's my mission, is to help as many people get off that roller coaster.
Which people do you love helping the most, type of industry or area that they're in? And which are the most challenging?
The people I love the most are people in healthcare and tech. Okay. A lot of times, the tech people are they can't fathom that there's a story to tell. And then when they hear it, they're like, oh my gosh, we are more than just equipment or software salespeople. We are making a difference. And certainly healthcare, the stakes are usually very high. And let's see, the ones that are the most difficult sometimes can be professional services people who think they know everything and aren't coachable and don't really want to change what they're doing and don't really realize that good work is not enough anymore.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would give that professional services field even more of a double click and niche and call them attorneys. Mostly because they're looking at the watch every time you're trying to work with them in a workshop, thinking I'm missing out on billable work, something they still have to get over. I love asking guests on the program this question, John. I want to see where this goes. You've been thriving in your career. You've got an unbelievable way of speaking. You have a great practice in helping people really tell better stories. But we all have days where we're not quite kicking on all cylinders and we're not quite thriving. John Livesay, when you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek, or what individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Well, I haven't always been thriving. I got laid off in 2008 and had to reinvent myself and not take that personally. And it felt like a kick to the gut, and realizing that I lost my job, but not my identity, and having to learn how to sell digital from print. And so Also, being an entrepreneur, it's not the steady income that you have when you have a paycheck. So there's a little bit of a adjustment to that. I would say that, and this is the advice I give other people, is if you're having a blah day or discouraged or just got rejected, call somebody who hired you or bought from you and just check in on them. Don't try to sell them anything. It's great customer service follow-up anyway. Like, let's say you sold somebody a car, and you're just like, hey, how are you liking your new car? Oh my God, have that energy in your head before you pick up the next email, phone call, whatever, because you go, oh yeah, that's why I do this. And realize that not everyone's a fit, and that's okay.
You are going to have more no's than yeses. It's just capitalizing on the ones that are the yeses, which is very
and I like to say no now doesn't mean no forever too.
Right. And I love no, because the faster you get to know, you get to close more yeses in the time you need to.
Yes.
Let's do this before we have a real fun time on Fun Street here. Share with the listeners all the places people can find you, websites, URLs, programs. You have a special program and offer that's out to many of the type of people that listen to Thrive Loud. So I think they will love it. So this is the plug section. We'll put it on the show notes, but please, you give us
if you text the word pitch, PITCH, to 66866 on your phone, I send you a free ebook of the top storytelling tips that include a roadmap on how to go from invisible to irresistible.
Okay.
And johnlivesay.com is my website. If you can't remember any of that, just Google the Pitch Whisperer and my content shows up. And if anybody wants to explore learning and working with me, I do have an online experience where I work with people who hate selling but love what they do, whether they're a coach or an entrepreneur. And, that goes everything from not just winning new business, but I want to be a TEDx speaker. I want to learn how to pitch to get on TV or get a magazine to cover me. So it's all, the storytelling impact is huge on people's careers.
Awesome. John Livesay, permission to go down Fun Street with me.
Let's go.
All right. Can you share with the listeners your all-time favorite movie, the one you shared with me?
Manchurian Candidate?
That wasn't the one, but I love that movie too.
No, it was.
There's two of those movies.
Shawshank Redemption, I believe it was. Yes.
Hold on, we're going to talk about both of them. First of all, let's go to Manchurian Candidate. Which Manchurian Candidate? The more recent one or the previous one, like the
previous one, the old black and white, Frank Sinatra, all that. Yeah.
Excellent. Why did that movie connect so much with you?
Well, it was my first awareness that people aren't always telling the truth, and that there's levels upon levels of how you can be brainwashed into doing something that you're not even aware that you're being brainwashed. And of course, advertising's accused of that a lot of the time. Yeah. And so that whole premise to me was really fascinating, of what's the triggers, and that there's leaks to the brainwash, and you can tell something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. So that's a story that definitely kept me on the edge of my seat.
And the Shawshank Redemption.
That's my favorite movie on so many levels, mostly because you can put somebody's body in prison, but not their mind. And then, of course, it's what a wonderful story of friendship, transcending horrible situations, and creating your own reality.
I like it. We're going to do the speed round here in Fun Street, and this is how this rolls. I'm going to ask you something. I want the first thing that comes to your head. These are things that mostly lift you up, mostly make you feel good, basically make you thrive.
Okay.
You ready?
Ice cream is the answer to everything. But go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll get to that one. That's for sure. A song you love to hear, or one that pumps you up?
Wow. Because they're totally different things. Corner of the Sky, the recent version by Ben Platt.
Favorite food that's not a dessert?
Oh, salmon.
Which flavor ice cream is your favorite flavor?
Chocolate mint.
Chocolate. Oh, I love chocolate. Chocolate mint. Like, we're talking like with the green ice cream and the chocolate mint chips in them. Yeah, those
exactly.
Like the mint chip. I'm a big fan of that. An activity you wish you did more of?
Swimming.
An activity you wish you did less of?
Push-ups.
Well, that means you're doing a lot of them. That's a good thing.
Yes.
If I could snap my fingers and you could go anywhere in the world, where are you?
Lisbon, Portugal.
Why?
I have had that come up so many times in the last 2 years. Friend moved there. People keep talking about it. I've looked it up in terms of the weather, the food, the architecture. I just can't wait to get to go.
Spectacular. And you haven't been yet. You're looking to go.
I haven't been yet. Yeah.
I like it. When it comes to stories, when you were a child, what was your favorite story to read or hear?
Oh gosh, my favorite story. I think I was really into Tom Sawyer and that whole adventure and the concept that you could. I'm pretty sure this is the right story. People think you're dead, and you get to hear your own eulogy.
Yeah,
I thought that was fascinating. I was like, what an interesting premise, and at such a young age. So yeah.
Last one here for the speed round. When you speak on stage and you open with a story, is there one story you love sharing more than any other? Because I know it's not the same one each time. I know you've got a variety of items to choose from. One that you like telling more often than not.
It's the story of when I was a lifeguard, and I was in my teens, and I thought I was really cool with the mirror sunglasses and the zinc oxide on my nose and a mirror and a whistle around my neck. And I was mostly just telling kids not to run on wet cement. But one day there was a little girl at the edge of the diving board, and I could tell it was her first time. And she finally jumped off, and she was underwater too long. And I knew she was panicking. I couldn't even, throw her or anything. So I had to dive in and save her. And I always wondered if I would stay calm during those situations. And when it was over, I did that. I was able to rely on my training and not panic and stay calm. And that has reinforced that message, that trust in myself. When I got laid off, I didn't panic and stayed calm. So that's one of my favorite stories of the takeaway from it.
I like it. John Livesay, truly a pleasure to have you on here. You killed it. And more notably, keep listening to all those great stories and keep helping other people figure out how they need to tell them, because we love great stories out there. So thanks for all the stuff that you do. And thank you for coming on Thrive Loud.
Thanks for having me, Lou. It's a lot of fun.
You got it. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.